And welcome everyone to what's going to be a very fun Powering Digital Out-of-Home Measurement discussion. So I'm going to firstly introduce you to our expert panellists this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got Tara Coverdale, who's the Group Director of Data and Insights at DOOH. Christina Smart down the end, Head of Data and Innovation and Audience Insight at JC&Co. Belinda Cooper, welcome, Solutions Consultant at MIQ. And Matt here in the middle, Matt Proud is the Associate Director of Business Development at the Trade Desk. So kicking us off, a consistent theme with industry surveys that the IAB conduct with advertisers and agencies is that cracking the measurement challenge is a key to unlocking greater ad investment. Measurement means many different things, but generally buyers are seeing opportunities in standardised metrics for planning and delivery reporting, cross-media or cross-channel measurement, proving effectiveness in achieving a client's objectives in terms of brand and sales. So today's discussion, we're going to get under the hood of what all of this means for digital out-of-home in the context of omnichannel planning and campaign buying. So I want to start with giving everyone a bit of an overview of the landscape of the data sets that are out there in market. We've seen Grant's presentation here that Move brings together a collection of data sets, but there's a range of other data out there, various methodologies and technologies being used. So I might kick off with Belinda. And Belinda, can you tell us about a couple of these key data sets that people are using?
Yeah, for sure. So MIQ, for those that don't know, we're a programmatic managed service. So we work across, majority of what we do is ATV, but we're also starting to see a bit of an uptake in digital out of home. So it's been interesting to sort of look from that into how we measure out of home. So obviously we work with the DSPs and we'll get the impression data. Very interesting to hear what's happening with Move and how that's coming through. So excited to see that. But yeah, I guess mobile data we're still quite reliant on. So using a lot of that for how we measure, particularly omnichannel. But also that postcode data, it's super powerful, especially like when the cookie goes, we'll be looking at tying that together using postcodes because it is quite strong using that.
Sure. Matt, how about you? What are you seeing, insights and data that you're seeing that advertisers and agencies are using?
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar position really. There's a lot of mobile data currently, but what's interesting is for the first time we're being able to tap into first-party data as well. So historically that's been reliant on MAIDs, the device IDs, but we're actually beginning to use our household graph now as well, which is really exciting. So being able to look at pixel data, for example, and being able to understand the devices connected to that and using that to help implement which screens are indexing highly against particular audiences as well.
Tara, so in this landscape of digital out-of-home measurement, how does Move fit in then?
I think Move plays a pivotal role as the industry standard audience measurement platform. It's really the foundation and that common currency that can sit either alongside these other data sets that are very specific, have specific use cases, but it's really that baseline and the foundation for how we measure, we value, we assess, and how we talk about both the quantity and the quality of the audience that the out-of-home sector delivers. And I think through the journey since Move launched back in 2010, the continued challenge or the opportunity for the industry is to keep pace with the change that's occurring. I mean, we're lucky to be in a sector that's grown. We've seen growing audiences over many years. We've seen the proliferation of new formats and environments. And we're now seeing consumers use public spaces in different ways. And I think, Grant's side hustle of Move 2 is keeping him busy because of that. But it's really important that as an industry, we stay ahead of that change and we ensure that that baseline of measurement is really robust and allows out-of-home to be evaluated across all operators, all environments, and alongside other media across the metrics that really matter.
Yeah, awesome. Christina, first-party data is becoming more important in measurement. What's the role of media owners' first-party data for understanding digital out-of-home audience and advertising success?
So this is a really interesting question. The first thing is, as we all know, you can't exactly log into a billboard. You can't go past it and go, hi, I'm this person, I have this profile. And so that therefore means that we're in a unique space where we don't actually collect necessarily first-party data that's considered around audiences and aids in targeting. But one thing we can do is work with our partners in the contract space. So if you think about it, the way that out-of-home works, for those that aren't necessarily aware, is we actually pitch for the advertising rights in different environments. That might be in an airport, that might be in a train station or a bunch of train stations. It might be a council contract or even a single landowner. And those people have at their fingertips relevant first-party data. That might be people who are using certain transport networks, PAX data from airports, passenger numbers. I'm using jargon already, stop me. And that means that we're able to start to understand and work with them even more to be able to collect that information. But it's never going to be a single customer view picture. It's always going to be an amalgamation of information modelled through things like Move or our own ways of doing modelling, based perhaps in ABS and other kind of relevant sources like that, to understand the full picture of customers.
Wonderful. So let's delve into the preparation for programmatic. So we're at the early stages of programmatic digital out-of-home adoption, but we've seen programmatic drive, general display expenditure, based on its capabilities, and advertisers are naturally going to want to realise some of those benefits for digital out-of-home. Both Tara and Christina, what are the preparations being made to enable robust planning and delivery data for programmatic digital out-of-home? Do you want to start? Yeah.
Okay. Look, I think it's, again, a really great evolution of the industry to consider that out-of-home can now be bought in different ways, and that we can leverage things like time, location, and data overlays and the like in activating. And I think it's a reflection of out-of-home's growing role across the purchase funnel, whereas out-of-home's traditionally been known as a reach builder. We can build awareness, we can build consideration. I think what programmatic is really unlocking is that ability to convert at the bottom of the funnel, and obviously there's the interest and the uptake in that type of capability, and I think therefore metrics have to be related to actually how many people have I got the potential to reach at particular locations and times, all the way through to how you actually measure the performance and the outcome and the attribution, which is obviously something that is really key in this space. So I think Move 1.5 was probably the first step towards improving the measurement of digital out-of-home, because that's firmly where programmatic sits. I think the introduction of the impression multiplier and generating metrics that are more granular to time and location is going to be really powerful in that planning phase. And obviously making that data available across platforms as a common currency is powerful. And then Move 2, where the measurement will become far more robust and granular and specific to location, will allow those data overlays in a more consistent way, is going to further sort of supercharge that growth, and the consistency in the way that the industry applies those methods is, I think, very, very powerful, and should encourage advertisers to use out of home for those more conversion-based objectives.
Yeah. So, Christina, do you want to add in?
Yeah, just a little bit to add on that. I think it's a bit of a challenge probably to consider out of home in the media mix because of its differentiation and its planning and its traditional way of not being able to actually anticipate who has visibly seen the asset and then measure that impact. I think it's a bit of a collaborative call to arms for us all to think about how we start to embark upon that. I mean, you talked a little bit about the kind of unification of different data sets to understand from a household level, potentially what's going on in terms of media consumption. But that changes dramatically once people go outside. And I think we've really strived to try and understand how we can play in that space and break down that silo. But it does take the collaboration of many. And when it comes to measurement, it's the same thing. We often see this need to prove the value of what we're bringing, programmatic, digital, and even classic out of home. But unfortunately, it's really tough to actually get people to work with us to create those experiments or case studies or proof points around why it's so important. So I'm kind of asking you guys to give us a hand here and work with us, because we're not going to get it right, but we can gain insight every time.
Yeah. Matt, what are you seeing some of the opportunities and challenges in programmatic being measured as part of an omnichannel campaign, so alongside other programmatic activities?
Absolutely. For me, this is the most exciting part of this. You know, where we are right now in programmatic out of home, probably similar to where we were with connected TV maybe 5 years ago. And, you know, none of our media is in silos. We're planning in omnichannel strategy. Everything has a symbiotic relationship with the other channels. And being able to see that, the impact of that is really exciting. So there's a standard report that you can run by the trade desk called the Path to Conversion report, similar to what you're talking about in the funnel there. And, you know, digital at home absolutely plays its part in that upper funnel. You know, you can look in at things like brand lift studies, footfall conversions and stuff like that are easily done. But for the first time, and again, utilising that household graph, so, you know, if your mobile is on you while you're out, you've been in close proximity to a screen at the time that the ad's been served, and then you've gone back home, we understand the other devices that mobile's linked to. If you then go on to a website and go through to the client's website and make a purchase, we can begin to understand all of that. And unequivocally, every single path to conversion report that I've seen where digital at home is included within that exposure significantly reduces the time to conversion, which ultimately is reducing CPA and increasing ROAS as well. So really strong, like, you know, not necessarily saying that we should be looking to optimise the lower funnel metrics with digital at home, but it certainly plays a really integral role in those lower funnel metrics as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How about you, Belinda?
Agree. We're doing similar sort of stuff. But yeah, I think one of the challenges really for us is a lot of how we tie all our other channels together is through an IP address. It's quite strong. When you look at the ACR data that we use, obviously don't have that with digital out of home, so we've had to look at other ways to do it. But for out of home postcode data, I'm going to go on about it again. It's still very powerful, so it's something we're looking at across all our channels now. So yeah, just really good opportunity to tie everything together, like knowing where people are and the personas for them in particular areas.
Our research has also shown that agencies see industry standard measurement as a growth opportunity for programmatic digital out of home. And obviously we've got Move working towards that unified industry currency. Tara, just remind us why industry standards are important and what are the principles that this currency needs to deliver?
Yeah, so industry standards really lay the foundation and do the groundwork for the industry to take up new technologies and tools. They provide that consistent way that we talk about what we do, that we value assets and audiences, and they provide common meaning. And the industry's obviously done a lot in the standardisation space to standardise what is a long history of lots of acronyms and very strange words. So I think that, you know, there's benefit to that everyone speaks the same language. It sounds pretty basic, but that is important. But I think there's the potential for standardisation to really play into the benefits that advertisers derive from digital media at the moment around ease of transaction and ease of buy. That I think out of home we have some room for improvement. That just ability to not just understand what I'm buying, but to centralise capability as data becomes more frequently used and overlaid, as there are more and more assets, there'll be over 100,000 in Move 2 that are measured, that ability for us as an industry to think about standardisation in the form of, well, how do we make it easy? How do we standardise what we do and how we do it so that it's easier to buy? I think is an opportunity, and again, that automation and that ease of trade really play into those attributes that digital media really do well. And I think standardisation is not just making it a bit easier for us as a sector, we often probably think that, but I think it's allowing us to play a larger and bigger role in that broader digital marketplace.
Yeah, good. So JJ and Hilary spoke in this session earlier this morning about evolving programmatic digital out-of-home standards. In our survey last year, we found that there was an opportunity for verification standards and for the impression multiplier standardisation that we spoke about. Matt and Belinda, what's the state of verification in digital out-of-home? Is this something that is needed?
Take that one. Yeah. I mean, it's it certainly is a hot topic at the moment. Look, I think as with anything, advertisers, marketers are well within their right to want to understand the verification process and whatever else. So I think this transition to programmatic has presented a lot of opportunities, though, right? Whereas in the traditional buys, there was obviously a lot of trust going on between this is what we are buying, this is what's on the plan, and you get the report back at the end. In programmatic, we've obviously got a lot of different players in that space that are verifying that. You've got the media owners, the SSP and the DSP, working on both sides of both the buy and sell there as well. So I think there's a lot to look into the methodology around that as well. A lot of it is around pixel firing. I mean, from the reports that I've seen, it's about 99% aligned, right? Because if the pixel's firing with us via the DSP and via the SSP as well, then it's all very much aligned. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's down to marketers to decide if that's something that they want to include within their buys, yeah.
Belinda, did you want to?
Yeah, same. It does come down to the clients, essentially. Like when you look at other channels like display, where verification has been kind of not everyone, but most clients want to have it included. So I think it'll be a similar thing, I would say, in digital out-of-home.
Christina, obviously we're making some progress there with the impression multiplier standardisation. Is there anything you wanted to just add on that from a standardisation or the verification piece there?
I wouldn't call myself an expert on verification, thankfully, but in terms of verifying audience delivery, that is something that's quite unique, because I think at the moment, given that Move is a measured model looking at a typical day's worth of travel, it does mean that there is sometimes a little bit of an interesting discussion that comes into play with anyone who was buying out of home, thinking about, why am I getting the same result that I did 6 weeks ago or 6 weeks ahead? I think that's what makes Move 2.0 so compelling, is that we'll finally be able to see the impact of seasonality. And I think also that's when we can overlay additional data sets, such as mobility data or, the classic kind of audience segmentation data, to get more refinement. But what I think is critical is probably us as a group to start to standardise what some of those processes and protocols mean, particularly in the wake of the consideration of privacy. Yeah. And the reason why I think that's quite important is because I like your point about the postcode contextual targeting, but I also know that that doesn't necessarily give the refinement of understanding exactly who's in front of the panel, which is where your data comes in. So it's probably measuring a smoothness between the two. That was a terrible way to describe it, but I'm hoping you understand what I mean. I guess it's also, if we start to embark upon omni-channel measurement, what are the protocols for what does that mean? What is a viewable or viewed impression in out of home relative to the rest of what's on display, for example? And how do we, I guess, identify what's going on between all of those, and whether or not someone has seen the ad on the screen, the ad on their phone, the ad on the TV, and the ad, obviously, in out of home.
Thank you. Let's talk a bit about metrics. So ad attention has been a rather talked about topic in trade articles and media owners doing studies, industry narrative there as those measurement techniques have emerged. The IAB's work in this area last year, we provided an overview of the various methodologies from ad tech, eye tracking and neuroscience. Christina, what would your advice to advertisers and agencies looking at these various methods to assess attention to digital out of home and then comparing that to, from other advertising channels?
Yeah, this is a loaded question for me personally and probably professionally, because the one thing to note is that you can't necessarily put a camera on a billboard and film the public without a lot of consideration as to where, why and how you're doing that. And that's currently some of the methodologies that are taking place, which totally celebrate and think is really interesting. And I think everything that can provide a qualitative layer of what you're buying and what you're serving is really instrumental in understanding the context of what you're trying to do, fleeting glances to looking for longer. I think we're lucky that Move has a lot of visually adjusted metrics baked in. That gives us, I guess, a bit of leeway. I would say that the neuro impact factor as well has given us an additional layer of quality that isn't present in the data that a lot of SSPs and DSPs, though, can access. That's something that you can only really access when running it in the Move platform itself at the moment. So that might be something that we look at with Move 2.0 if that's something that the industry would like. I think also one last thing, and it's something that Brad... that's not really protocol to call someone out in the audience, is it? But I don't care. Brad and I talk about this a lot, is the one thing in out of home, you can't really get away with telling lies in public. And I think creative has an incredibly important role to play in this. Because you are working with a channel that is fleeting glance or absorbed in certain context, you have to really consider, and this is tricky, you have to really consider the creative message and how it's going to be received and perceived. It's very different to lingering on a website or seeing a YouTube or a connected television ad. It's something that I think all of us would like to address in some way, shape or form, but we can't do it without everyone wanting to lift the bonnet on that and understand it, because that has a role to play in attention.
Creative, biggest driver of ad effectiveness anyway. Yeah. So reach and frequency and impressions are the most commonly used metrics to assess digital out of home. But these quality of delivery metrics should be used in combination with other metrics to assess the effectiveness once the ad's been delivered. So Belinda, what are you seeing metrics and techniques being used by the agencies and advertisers to assess the campaign effectiveness from programmatic digital?
Yeah, I think attention is huge at the moment, not just in digital out of home. It's something that we're looking at across all channels. It's what we're talking at. So we work with Adelaide Intelligence. They're not looking at digital out of home at the moment, but it's on their roadmap. So it'll be interesting to see the attention metrics that come through from Move as well. But yeah, that's kind of something that we have been looking at to measure. Yeah.
Matt, tell us about some of the other metrics that you're seeing, and how close are we getting to closing that loop and linking programmatic digital out of home advertising to things like in-store visits or sales uplift?
Yeah, absolutely. There are always lots of options out there. As we mentioned, footfall studies are readily available now. Obviously utilises the same kind of data and methodology that we're looking at ad exposures as well, so it's quite easy to run with those. Brand studies as well are becoming more and more pertinent at the moment. Obviously it's very much a reach and awareness upper funnel metric piece there, so the brand studies certainly assist. We're actually in a beta at the moment for audience metrics. I know there are some other players in the ecosystem that look at that as well. So ARP, audience rating percentage, is something that we're beginning to look at. Obviously, if you're looking at all of this in the context of omnichannel, it is extremely fragmented and nuanced, right? It takes a little bit. It's for those that have come from an out-of-home background into running programmatic out-of-home, it's great, but trying to explain some of the nuances of programmatic out of home to people coming from a digital background takes a little bit more explaining. So, you know, we've got things like OTP for display, right? And again, that's a one-to-one. You can expect pretty high numbers with that if you've got the right data and the right targeting applied. But in a one-to-many medium, that's going to be completely different, right? And again, we can only go off what we've got. There's no silver bullet in this space. Move 2.0 sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm really looking forward to beginning to see all of that come through in the bid streams and stuff. But getting an understanding, getting a sample, utilising that geospatial, that mobile data to understand these are the devices that were exposed, and then cross-referencing them against the audience that you were initially looking to target against. So again, we can't target a screen based on a particular audience, but we can look at which screens index highly against an audience. So ARP is going to allow us to establish a kind of a benchmark, if you will, in regards to what that ratings percentage would be without any optimization. And then utilising the impression multiplier, utilising the data that we're getting back in regards to the exposure per screen per hour, we're then able to optimise towards the screens that are indexing highest against that audience. There's always going to be positive wastage in out of home in regards to you know, reaching people outside of that specific audience that you were planning against. But that's positive, you know, that's penetration, that's awareness, and it's about that mental availability. It's about that awareness piece there as well. But like I said, ultimately, what really excites me personally is closing that loop, is getting it back to understanding the role that this upper funnel, like amazing channel has played in getting our brand out there, making us mentally available, awareness, and then all the way through to purchases, whether that is on the client's website, direct-to-consumer website, but ultimately, what would be really exciting is obviously closing that loop within retailers as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is the age-old. That's been a challenge for out of home, even traditionally, is proving that effectiveness. It's never been the easiest medium to really pinpoint and effectively close the loop, just due to the nature of the medium itself. And I think that is a challenge here. There's this desire to close the loop and tie everything up in a little bow and say, I absolutely know that this investment led to that outcome. But a lot of data that we have worked with over the years, and I know there's a session by Analytic Partners this afternoon, but work with them from a market mix modelling perspective, shows across billions of dollars of ad spend and ROI studies that out of home is proven to do a lot of that heavy lifting. And if that's happening at the top of the funnel and complementing other channels a little bit lower, it is quantifiable, but I think the challenge is going to be at a campaign level, how you go about trying to quantify that. I think a lot of advertisers know it's there, but in this sort of desire for the sugar hit of I want a metric, I want to know my ROI, I think it's an ongoing challenge for the industry.
Yeah. I think Matt said there's no silver bullet.
No, there is no silver bullet. But again, I think if you can quantify a certain amount, like a sample of what you're running, it obviously illustrates the power of everything that you aren't necessarily able to measure there as well. And again, you know, we talk about omnichannel. Obviously, we don't operate within the walled gardens of Meta and Google, but what we can illustrate is the impact that digital out of home has on clicks from search and social. You know, if we've got a pixel on a client's site, we're able to see where they've come from. And again, categorically, exposure to digital at home increases the clicks that we're seeing on paid for search and social ads as well, which is huge, yeah.
We might give the audience an opportunity to ask you people some questions. Is there any questions from out there?
A couple on Slido now.
Yes.
One I think's been covered, about conversion measurement. I think we're probably filled in enough on
that
that,
one.
unless you want to go further. One is, has the growth of retail media first-party data changed the out-of-home measurement expectations? Who wants that?
I certainly know. I was reflecting on Move 1. I'm old enough to have been around when that was launched. And what I think was, at the time, sort of sub 100 centres nationally that had retail media even within the centre. And I think now with Move 2, that'll be over 1,000. And so again, the challenge from a measurement perspective is keeping pace with that rate of change in what now is an even, faster evolving sector. And this is a good question, I think, from just a future-proof perspective of how do you ensure we're building a model that at the moment measures people's behaviour in retail centres as they, peruse the corridors, to extending that to, the in-store experience. And I think it's something as an industry and collective, and based on what advertisers are seeking to achieve, it certainly makes sense to keep that in mind and to have a mechanism if need be to extend. Because again, I think back to common metrics and, trying to stitch together, we're trying to stitch together omni-channel planning and buying capabilities. I think the same could be applied to what you'd call at the moment more traditional out-of-home formats, and the extension into, if that is retailer media. Yeah, I think there's potential there.
I think absolutely. I think it's the most exciting space right now. Obviously, there's varying partners that have access to this kind of data and stuff like that. And we've got an integration with Flybys. It's not currently available with Digital at Home, but really, again, with the use of that household graph and understanding who an individual is, it's something that we can certainly begin to look at. But you've got the likes of IRI and stuff like that out there as well, obviously with purchase data. So it's definitely a space that I'm keeping a very close eye on.
Hi, Matt, you talked about footfall, I think, as an attribution metric.
Yep.
And I think I'm paraphrasing, but you're kind of saying it's easy. Are we not in more challenging environments? How do you do that? So in, say, a shopping mall, multi-level.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we are limited, obviously, to the data that we're getting via our partners, and elevation is one of those limitations, absolutely. But if there are brick and mortar stores further out, not with the consideration of multiple levels, then it's using the same methodologies we are for the ad exposure. I believe some of those partners do kind of look at a bit of a modelled approach to that as well, understanding, right, there's 4 layers to this mall and I've got a store here, so kind of taking that data and understanding the probability that it was on that particular floor. I think there's also discussions around like Wi-Fi within that as well, like connected to Wi-Fi on certain levels and stuff. But it's an interesting space, and again, multiple partners out there that offer that service, and all with varying methodology there as well.
We're anonymous, are we?
So, let me know how much detail you want to go into this. How can you assume a consumer is exposed with path to conversion if the gap between bid and exposure could be up to 2 hours?
That's a very good point. Well, look, ultimately we go with the data that we've got there. That's the data that's being passed through, and it's worked 100%. Ultimately, if we're looking at the results that we're seeing in the path to conversion, and there is a significant uplift in behaviours, whether that's clicks on search and social, or going into store, or conversions on a site, then I think the data illustrates itself that it is working.
Can I just add to that? I think what's integral is not to consider and always to think about the fact that out-of-home is a one-to-many medium. And so where there might be the perceived disparity between an audience segment or an audience bid with an audience volume selected for a particular programmatic campaign, what you're incidentally receiving at the end game is always more audience. And the impression multiplier gives us a bit of detail on that, but it also is always going to be more people than you probably are able to measure. Simply because if you think about your own behaviour, it's the same thing. You're only often modelled to be taking a certain amount of trips per day, 5. I know that, like the back of my hand now. But that doesn't mean on a certain day you're not taking 7. So always remember that, I think, when you're considering out of home, that it does sit uniquely in that regard. I think also just a point around measurement and considering, again, the difficulties of being able to accurately track people in multiple environments. You'll never be able to actually do that unless you worked collectively with a sampled panel, and that would be relatively impossible, but potentially something that eventually may happen with certain types of technology. It can't happen at the moment because mobile data only gives you a limited range of understanding, but so does sales uplift studies, and so does sales conversion studies, really, or mixed media modelling. You're only really getting an indication. If you think about sales, for example, you're looking at the incidental sales, but you're not necessarily looking at the supply chain. So a lot of the times people will buy more items because they're available in store. So it's really tricky to track. But I think we have to forgive ourselves, and especially in this kind of intermediary period of understanding programmatic and out of home in general, that we're at least giving ourselves an indication of what's working, and then working harder to fix it if it's not.
I think a lot of that's not, it's industry-wide, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, we're not rocket scientists. We're just trying to provide the utility.
All right, that's definitely panel of the question sort of appetite here. I will see who wants to take this. What's needed to get to true verification in digital out of home? A pixel solution seems like we're marking our own homework. Anyone want to pick that one up?
No.
Will be available outside.
I might tell you over lunch.
Perfect. Anyone else from the floor?
Yes.
Just going to add to that question about true verification, because I think, Tara and Christina, you might be able to comment on this, is the solutions at the moment around pixels, yeah, great, but in terms of the actual content delivery on the screen, say half the screen's down, what's that connection? Is there conversations happening between operations, verification partners, and collectively as an industry to say, is 100% of the content that's actually on the screen deemed the viewable impression, half of it? What's that connection? Is there work in terms of getting to that true verification solution?
Okay, I'll try and answer this as someone who's not in operations, but as someone who's been privileged enough to be working in out of home for a long time. So please don't paraphrase me. But what I would say is that Move measures a 100% visible on screen type measurement. So that's what you're getting with your audience, of course. In regards to the operational side of verification, there's a couple of ways that different media operators and owners are going about these things. There's even an old school kind of, I remember this from a long time ago, people who actually go out and verify the campaigns in person. We're lucky as well, this is a digital out-of-home convention, but we have quite a lot of classic assets, and we actually have people physically installing those day in and day out, well, on certain days, of course, and hopefully not in the rain. But they actually take a photograph of every single asset. So I think the process of verification is something that we can collaborate on with people who are on the ground, people who obviously have verification kind of businesses that are helping to provide that proof, and the media operators and owners themselves, I guess. I know that probably didn't answer your question, but I think also maybe that's also a standardisation discussion for us to have.
Got one last one, and it's not.
It's not tough.
But the brand lift studies that were mentioned, and how to do that in a way when it's not a one-to-one medium, methodology that works for out of home. What's best practice there?
Yeah, again, there are lots of different partners out there. The ones that we're working with currently, again, it's running the campaign, understanding the exposed device IDs, and then delivering mobile, the questionnaires via mobile, basically, to follow back up on that, and looking at control and expose and uplift there.
And traditionally in out of home, we've also done a lot of probably pre-COVID, but a lot of even in situ intercepts with customers. There's potential to use geographic data to understand where people either live or travel or work for online survey purposes. And then there are sort of store-based and the sales uplift studies that can be very targeted geographically. So again, sort of on that same theme of a one-to-many medium, you're wanting to reach the right many, and the measurement in a way also reflects that. It's more generalised around locations and stores and cohorts of people, and you're aiming to see that relationship and that uplift. So yeah, a number of ways to skin a cat essentially.
All right. That's it. Thank you very much. Please thank our experts, Tara, Nat, Belinda and Christina. Thank you.